I think from the beginning of my spiritual journey here, I've been very fascinated with non-doership,
Mhm.
but I find it extremely hard to practice it. Um, because I'm like, I can't just sit here and do nothing, right? And so that makes it really hard for me to even imagine what it means, you know.
Uh-huh.
Um, so yeah, I'm just throwing that out to you to talk about.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, the ego, when it hears non-doership, the ego hears sort of like, don't do anything ship, right? Like
Yeah,
sit on the couch and
yeah,
drool. That's what non-doership is. Um, non-doership means, so the Buddha said, actions happen, deeds are done, but there is no individual doer thereof. And the key word there is individual doer thereof. So the separate self imagines itself as being the catalyst for action in the universe. So one analogy I give for non-doership is the idea that like truly everything that happens to you in your life is not an isolated event, is it?
right, yeah, right,
It
right.
can't possibly be isolated. Everything is connected to everything else. You know, what made that person say that thing to you, which made you do that thing that you regretted? No, I'm the doer of that. Oh, guilt. What made them do that was somebody else and something else, and back and back and back until we get back to the Big Bang. So there's
Yeah,
no true cause of anything, which is why there's no doer of anything. So the analogy is like a domino line. If you set up a domino line across your living room and it goes up on the couch and down the thing, up the slide, down the ramp, into the cup, flips over, right? And then poof, it hits the final domino. The last domino knocks over. And then that second to last domino, which tipped over the final one, says, aha, I have done it. I have knocked over the final domino. That's ego, that's doership. So when we say non-doership, we're saying become aware. It's not something you do, obviously. Become
right,
aware of the fact that life is living you. Life is moving in your life. Every circumstance is a sequence of events that has innumerable causes, a chain reaction, you could say, that just moved through me as that second to last domino. And whatever action the person takes is not my action. It is the action of conditioning of the person. So conditioning is arising to meet circumstance, and that claimer, ego, just claims it and says, oh, I did that, but really
right,
nobody did it. So like another
right.
example we could use is the body. We have different organs in the body: stomach, heart, lungs, etc., circulatory system, neurological system, and on and on. Okay. So if you think about the fact of like, you can like feel your heartbeat right now. If you put your hand on your chest or your wrist or something, you can feel your heartbeat and then say, okay, that's my heart beating my blood. But what's making the heart beat, right? Have you ever thought about that? Like,
Hmm.
what's making the heart do the contractions? Well, it's a neurological impulse, a scientist might say. Okay, cool. What's making that neurological impulse send that signal? Like, what's moving that? What's doing that? Well, it's the action of, I don't know what I'm talking about. Electrodes in the brain are doing that. Oh, okay. What's making the electrodes send that signal? And you just keep going and you find there is no origin. Like it's this entirely interconnected system. There is no individual doer thereof.
Right,
So, truthfully, when we get rid of this idea of being the separate self that does actions and is guilty for everything undesirable that happens through me, when we get rid of that fantasy, that delusion, doing goes right along without a doer. Doing does not stop because doing is really inseparable from God. Like God is that ing, experiencing, seeing, doing, right? That is God. It's the present
hmm,
moment. It's always in motion, never ceasing, always flowing. Um, one present moment to the next for eternity, right? And then at the same time, paradoxically, maybe as all spiritual truths are, God is that ever present stillness that never moves, that never makes an action, that never appears or disappears, right? So God is both sides of that coin. There is no individual that's separate from life that can take independent actions separately from life. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. That it it sounds to me like really the work that I should not do is realize that I'm not doing anything already.
Yep. There's a
Okay.
there's a chapter in the book I Am That, which is like talks with Nisargadatta, and the chapter is called. So there's a term in the Hindu tradition called the jnani. Jnana is the word for knowledge, and a jnani is one that knows. So like a sage or a ascended master, as what a jnani is. So that Nisargadatta and other gurus will describe what the state of a jnani is like. And in this chapter, it's called God is the all-doer, the jnani, the non-doer. And it talks about this idea that the jnani is aware that it is doing nothing. And the way that this will play out, Zarkis, for you as you go deeper into this, I am not the doer, there is no doer. Life is flowing through me, life is living me, life is presenting itself to me. I am a puppet of life in the sense of I am that life. When you really deepen that understanding and surrender to that, what will happen to you is that everything will start to feel increasingly exhausting. And I think in that chapter, Nisargadatta even says, to the sage, even blinking the eyes is too much effort to make. And what that means is like, there is that voice that says, I'm doing it, I'm the doer, I'm the doer, I'm the doer, and it's taking responsibility for everything. And as you become aware of that voice, that doer, I am in control, right? The third belief of ego. You become aware of that voice and it starts to be almost annoying in a sense. And something in you, that restful, abiding place of awareness in you is like, ooh, get rid of that thing, man. We're done with that. Like that's served its purpose. And you just feel as if life is flowing, actions are happening. You see the body doing things, you're having conversations, but inwardly, you're like resting in a hammock, you know? You're like in a warm bubble bath with a glass of red wine. You're making no effort. You're not thinking what you're going to say next. You're not strategizing what you're going to do next because you now understand, I don't know. I can't possibly know what I'm going to say next, what I'm going to do next, what life is going to present to me next. It's always this unfolding mystery. And as soon as you surrender to that, you're just like, chilling. So that's kind of how the sage, the state of consciousness of a sage is, which is why sages are very quiet and they're very blissful, happy, peaceful. They don't have a need to, prove themselves or explain themselves. They're totally fine with whatever happens. That is what Christ refers to in the chapter where he says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy. My burden is light, and you will find rest for your souls. He's really pointing to this state of consciousness of non-doership. So begin just by being aware of what the body's doing and sort of take a relationship to the actions of the body like a child of like, wow, look at what the body's doing. Wow, it's picking up this glass, it's drinking the water. Oh, the water's so delicious. You're always this observer who doesn't have a clue what's going to happen, just like watching a movie, like a really interesting movie. You're involved in the movie to the extent that you're watching it, you're interested, you want to see what's going to happen next, but you're not suffering with the movie. You don't believe you're the dream character or the movie character, rather. You're just in that free witnessing place. Or maybe like a video game, right? You play a video game. If you die, you start the level over. You don't like go cry and call your friends that you just died on the game, right? Because you're not the character in the game. So it's like you can have that same relationship to life. You really can. And that is the place of freedom.
It's interesting that you bring up a video game. In some previous Zoom calls, it seems like the movie Soul was being brought up over and over, and I hadn't watched it yet. And but at a certain point, I was like, I gotta watch this film to see what they're talking about. It was like that was an element that needed to mix into the suffering. And at that moment, I, for a moment, I thought of life as like a game. Like I wasn't even, I was like totally disconnected from the suffering. I was just thinking, oh, my body is going through suffering right now. It's just a game. I just need to walk through this level. That's all. It's like inconsequential. It just is.
Yeah.
And then it went away. And then I was kind of in suffering again. It was just like a split, like a few moments of like
Mhm.
freedom. It felt like from everything.
Mhm.
I just wanted to share that.
And when that happens, Zarkis, you notice this, right? The ego will say to you, see, this is true reality. And that little vision of freedom was just a short little delusion you were having, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right,
And the reverse is the case, right? You saw reality for the first time. And what you're in now is the dream world, the nightmare of suffering. That ego's trying to keep you sucked and stuck in that nightmare. Oh, don't look at that. That was fake. That doesn't exist. It was just a little delusion you were having. This is the real world, buddy. And just expect it to do that. But the ticket out of that is you have to just fall in love with that glimpse of freedom you had.
right, right. You know, it's like stuck in my head, to be
Yeah.
honest. I
You
can't
can't
even get
unsee
it
it, can
out.
you?
Yeah, can't unsee it.
So
Uh,
here's an analogy that Ramana Maharshi would give for, truthfully, anytime we're trying to integrate a new state of consciousness, a new perception of freedom. What's an analogy? Like, let's say you're walking in a dark room and there's mouse traps set up throughout the room, right? And every time you get up, you step in one of the mouse traps, snaps on your foot. Oh, you peel it off. Oh man, it's so painful. I'm going to go back to bed. You go back to the bed. And then after a few minutes or hours go by, you want to try again. So you get up, you make a few more steps. You kind of remember where that one was, but snap, you step in another one. Oh gosh, you go back to bed. So that's kind of what it's like when you're integrating a new state of consciousness, when you're trying to change or uncondition yourself. You will get more accustomed to that path you have to take. The more you see it, the more you experience it, the more you
mm,
experience the right steps to take, you memorize them. Like they just stick in
mm,
you. And so the
mm,
analogy Ramana Maharshi would give was like like a sage meditates on the self in every moment, like a woman carrying a vase of water on her head, like she's very cautious and careful and keeping as still as possible to balance that water at all times. She's always aware of that vase of water on the top of her head so as not to spill it. And really, that's what you kind of have to do at first, initially, as you get used to that new state, and the ego will try to push you and shove you to get that vase to fall off. You have to be very still and quiet inside and just stick with it, right? Regardless of what the mind
mm,
is saying, if it's dancing and trying to spook you and scare you to tip the vase over,
mm,
you just observe without attaching and just keep your awareness on that vase you're balancing. And then very soon you gain your body gains that ability, that equilibrium to balance that vase with very little effort, if none at all. Just like the
mm,
mousetrap in your room, like once you learn the path, the first few times you're walking very carefully, one step, okay, take a next step. Okay, we're good, right? And that's how you walk. And then after you do it 100 times, you can get up in the middle of the night and walk that path, step, 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 step. The body's memorized it. It takes no effort. So you're at that stage
okay.
now where you're in that balancing phase. The ego's being very touchy with it and trying to pull you out of it. So you just meditate on the self, meditate on that state of freedom, fall in love with it, long for it, dream of it, desire it. That is truly what brings it to fruition. because everything is about your willpower. Thy will be done. But will is truly our interest in something, our desire for something. And this was something that I learned when I was at that stage where everything was starting to feel very exhausting to me. Like even thinking was starting to weary me, and I would have to go meditate all the time. And I still do this very often, but like I need to get away from these. I'm like drowning in this noisy mind. It's driving me insane. I want silence. And when I got to that place, I was like, I want silence more than anything else, more than my next breath. And when I got to that place, I would meditate and my mind would be completely quiet. And I would just stare around the room for like, 10, 20 minutes without a single thought occurring to me, because I was just basking in that delicious silence. And I had no interest in a thought. And if a thought would creep up, I would see it from a mile away and just turn all my interest away from it, like a dirty diaper being put in your face or something. And it clicked for me that day, man. I was like, oh, I get it. My will is my interest. Like when I have absolutely zero interest in the mind, then my mind is quiet. And if there's a thought that comes and we say, oh, the thought sucked me away. Well, kind of, but truthfully, you had some interest in that thought still, didn't you?
Yeah.
So recognizing that is where freedom is. Become as interested as possible in freedom and as disinterested as possible in bondage.
Man, that's amazing. That's amazing. That's amazing. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Zarkis. I appreciate it.